My name is Samuel Delaney, but everyone calls me Sam. And on that hot morning in Ponte Vedra, I opened the mailbox expecting nothing but a grocery flyer and the water bill. The sun was hitting the lake from the side, the fountain still tossing an arc that wouldn't shut off till around 10 that night, and the smell of dry St. Augustine grass came off the street like a tired sigh. At the back of the box, an envelope with the Pelican Harbor crest gleamed, thick, proud. The fine. They were charging me $100 a day, backdated because half my lawn wasn't uniform green enough for the board's taste. I stared at the paper for a few seconds, the way you stare at a photograph you don't recognize, and then I smiled. It wasn't a pretty smile. It was the tired kind only a stubborn 63-year-old man gives when he feels the old work muscle wake up. I had no idea that paper was the match. The gas can was coming right behind it. Before you judge me over a lawn, let me tell you two things I learned over 4 decades as a B2B credit manager. Paper rules and money travels a path. No gate is tall enough to stop those two. And if you've ever been worked over by an HOA, if you've tasted a fine that smells like wet grass, listen up because the price of admission to turn the game around is cheap. Paper, deadlines, and calm. What I did next, you won't believe. The letter had the tone of an angry dad. Areas appearing brown, presence of invasive weeds, a short window for compliance. They said my Florida-friendly plan looked desert-like. I read every line twice, grabbed my hardcover notebook, the one Elaine, my wife, called Sam's handcuffs, and wrote in the margin, cite the Florida water-saving landscaping statute, request a hearing, demand the fine be paused. Sounded simple, but simple in Pelican Harbor always costs you. I just didn't know how much yet. You're going to ask why all the fuss over grass. Because grass there was religion. Palms trimmed to a T, sprinklers running as sure as sunrise, and an architectural review committee that thought uniformity was the same as beauty. While I was reading the fine, 2 guys from Bay Breeze Landscaping sat in a truck in the shade smoking. The owner, a guy named Larry Givens, forearms baked by the sun, was arguing on the phone. I heard the word that's music to my ears. Past due. That's when I felt the click. Credit, that beast I'd fed for a little over 4 decades, woke up inside me. Do they pay you on time? I asked, like I was asking about the weather. Dribs and drabs for about 3 months, 18 grand and change still hanging out there. My mulch supplier doesn't take excuses, he said, eyes on the ground, his faded cap resting on his knee. I know the smell of an opportunity as well as I know the smell of fresh-cut grass. Right there at the community gate, with the fountain tossing a laugh in the background, I had something in my hand most folks don't recognize, the loose end of the money thread. And when you tug that end gently, a lot comes trailing out. You won't believe what I did next. But hold that picture for a second, because before I pull the thread, I need to show you the ball of yarn. I was 63 that summer, and had been living close to a decade in Pelican Harbor, a neighborhood with about 140 homes that looked like a realtor's brochure. A lake with ducks, a fountain that shut off around 10 at night, a gate that opened when you smiled at a camera that never smiled back. My house was 1 story, a coquina-colored shingle roof, 2 dwarf sabal palmettos Elaine picked out with a grin, and a porch with 2 wooden chairs, the tool cabinet arranged by order of use, and a glass of iced tea that, by that hour, was sweating like a pot lid. My car was a metallic brown Lexus ES, light leather that popped when I sat, a radio that insisted on sax jazz and baseball broadcasts when the night air got good to breathe. I kept the place the way a man does who's seen a spreadsheet turn into a lawsuit. Elaine passed 6 years earlier. The world got quieter, and the house got bigger. My kids, Mark and Allison, live in Atlanta and Raleigh. They come for the big holidays and sometimes mid-year when they can. Mark works in IT. He talks in sprints and ship dates. Allison teaches literature. They learned from me and their mother the simplest, hardest thing: pay what you owe and listen to folks who've been around longer. It wasn't always easy. Last fall, when I said I was swapping half the front lawn for native plants, Mark glanced at his phone and said, "Dad, the HOA's going to make a fuss. Sell the house and come closer. I listened, took a breath, and answered without heat. I planted you in a neighborhood with a decent school even when money was tight. Now I'm planting mully and saving water. If there's a fuss, I'll handle it. The Florida-friendly idea didn't come from a blog. It came from the water bill, from a UF IFAS report, and from a new love that showed up after Elaine was gone. Monarchs. The spring before, I watched a butterfly land on a milkweed that sprouted on its own by the mailbox, and it squeezed a part of my chest I thought had dried up. I bought starts, learned the rhythm of drip irrigation, knelt to hear the click when the hose seeded, breathed in the sweet smell of fresh mulch, the fine coquina dust on my big toe. The plan was a drawing I made on graph paper, pencil, and ruler, with pen to ink the border. I planted mooly grass that blushes pink come October, kunti that looks like a miniature dinosaur, sunshine mimosa that closes when you touch it, and milkweed so the monarchs could make a stop. I set my last name into a stone I bought in St. Augustine. The letters sunk so deep you want to run your hand over them. And I prepped the envelope for the committee with a polite cover letter and a copy of the state rule that protects water-saving landscaping. I walked out of the post office with that green receipt stuck to the envelope like a medal and headed straight for the porch, where the late-day air mixed the citrus bite of the tea with the memory of Elaine's perfume in the curtains. The letter to the committee went out with my request for common sense. The reply came back with a rubber stamp face, and that's when the past, the school of credit, sat down next to me and said, "Get up, time to work." What started with grass ended in receipts, records, meetings, and people hugging me after a vote count. But before that came humiliation, dripping like a leaky faucet. 2 weeks after my envelope with the plan landed at the management office, the so-called courtesy notice showed up. Heavy paper, Pelican Harbor's crest winking under the kitchen light, and that written voice that loves to repeat words like uniformity, compliance, presenting a brown appearance. I called Marnie, the manager at the company that ran our community. Her voice sounded like someone reading an email out loud. The committee denied it, Mr. Delaney. The community values a uniform green. Your plan was considered desert-like. The state statute says you can regulate standards, not ban them. Florida's water-saving landscaping law, I said slow and clear, like I was teaching a class to a distracted student. You may appear at the next board meeting, and you'll pause the fines till then. The fines continue, sir. I hung up with the feeling of getting slapped with a glove. To the HOA, it was just another click in a system. To me, it was an open wound. I sent a letter with return receipt, attached photos, marked deadlines in my notebook, requested a formal hearing, asked to be on the agenda. The reply came back almost automatic. Appear at the meeting. The fines continue. And then fate, which loves irony, played its hand. At the entrance, the Bay Breeze truck pulled up with a hood shining like it had been waxed twice, and a bank account dirty with delay. I asked if they were getting paid. Larry said there was a little over 18 grand and change hanging out there. About 3 months of promises, a mulch supplier calling, and workers wanting overtime. I know that map by heart. On one side, a board grinning through fines. On the other, a vendor staring at past due. In between, a management company logging everything in a spreadsheet that doesn't pay a soul. I handed Larry my card and asked him to meet me for coffee at Southern Grounds in Neptune Beach. People think business happens in conference rooms. The real kind happens where it smells like fresh grounds and the pen writes smooth. I opened my notebook, listed the invoices, asked to see what they'd done and when, where he trimmed, where he seeded, where he replaced a palm. He had everything in a folder that smelled like warm plastic. I did the math on paper and walked out with an offer I'd made 100 times before. I'll buy your past due invoices for 11.5 grand, cash. You assign me the receivables. I become the collector. He gets to breathe and pay for mulch. I get what I was missing, position. He stared out the window just long enough to picture money hitting his account, then stuck out his hand. The grip had the firmness of a man who wants to sleep. I wired the funds that afternoon, and that little confirmation beep hit my phone like music. I left with the assignment signed and notarized. descriptions of the invoices, dates, services, and a principal that scraped like a skinned knee. A little over 18 grand. In my pocket, the feeling I'd found the right lever. I could have stopped there and waited, but injustice grows fat in air-conditioned rooms with free coffee. While I was closing with Larry, the clubhouse pool was closed until further notice. The management company's own newsletter asked for understanding about delayed payments. I translated that in a heartbeat. People mad about fines, vendors unpaid, a pool that smelled like sour promises. I called Atlantic Pool Works. The owner, a fast-talking guy named Nate, said straight up they were owed a little over 6 grand. He'd burned through what was in the till, juggled the card, and now the crew didn't have money for chlorine, filters, the basics. If I buy it, will you assign it? I asked. No garnish. If you pay today, he said, halfway between resigned and hopeful. We settled at 3.5 grand. He emailed the invoices in a short note, sent the signed assignment, thanked me twice, and I heard the relief in his voice on that second, thank you, the kind you say when a weight slides off your chest. It was more than money. It was dignity. Saturday afternoon, the house was quiet, the warm air making the screen door creak, and I sat at the computer and filed the financing statement, the form that, in plain English, tells the world, if this debtor tries to duck the creditor, someone's watching. I listed the association as debtor, my LLC title note partners, as the one holding the claim, and laid out the collateral, the assigned invoices, rights, and all. I paid the fee, got the filing number, printed it, and slid it into a plastic folder. I didn't write the number in my notebook. I wrote something else. Skip your payables, lose your say, record your claim, and you get your turn. While the paperwork took shape, the human part gnawed at me. The fine hit with clockwork regularity, 100 a day. In a little over a week, the letter said I owed about 900 just in fines, the kind of number that makes you want to crumple paper. I took a breath, pictured my neighbors, grabbed my clipboard, and stepped out. The fight had climbed over my fence. I went door to door. The heat glued my shirt to my back. The smell of citronella candle mixed with too much bleach from an unused pool and a Sunday cookout. I talked to Nia, an engineer at Mayo with clear eyes that meet yours. I talked to Ronnie, a retired Marine who speaks short and carries the weight of a man who's seen a real desert. The Carters, who love yard flamingos. Mrs. Carter, who feeds the ducks. The man on the corner who's always sweeping his walk. I told them the numbers. Fines piling up, the pool still shut, vendors unpaid, the state law that said my garden wasn't a crime. I talked water, heat, and the monarch that landed on my milkweed one morning. And I asked for what the statute allows us, signatures to call a special meeting. I needed 20%. I wanted a little more. In 2 days, my brown lawn turned into a banner, and the clipboard got heavy with names. I brought in 37 signatures. The minimum was 29. Filing that felt like a judge's gavel. Marnie's look when she took the stack? Part irritated, part surprised. Micro victory. And every little breath of relief opened a door to bigger annoyance on the other side. The next day, the management company emailed me a notice of intent to place a lien. They said they'd slap one on my house if I didn't pay the fines. I laughed in the kitchen, jazz standards on the radio, and wrote a short email to their lawyer, attached the assignments, cited my filing, and explained that any action against me, without first paying what the association owed its vendors, would earn a challenge and a demand to see the books. My phone buzzed before the ice melted. Lawyers love phones. Mr. Delaney, you are creative. Occupation, credit. Hobby, lawns, I said, in the voice of a man who knows his ground. The association is willing to talk. Great. At the board meeting, you rushed onto the calendar for Thursday night? I asked, the flyer already stuck to my fridge. Yes. I hung up thinking the fight had left the yard for the big table with padded chairs. That's when my plan, just paper till then, turned into theater, and I had the script. Thursday night, the clubhouse smelled like air conditioning wrestling sweat. Folks brought folding chairs, makeshift fans made from old mail, little water bottles with wedding labels. There was a hum, like a hive near bloom. Up front, the president, Greg Lambert, hair gel shining even in the shade. The treasurer, Carol Franks, eyes like a spreadsheet with color-coded cells. And Anselmo, a man who filled space with empty sentences. Marnie sat beside them with a stapler, clips, and tight lips. On the wall, a TV waiting to pretty up ugly numbers. When my name came up on the agenda, the clock had already chewed through the first half hour. I stood with the same file case Elaine nicknamed, leaned on the table like a man who knows his destination, and started simple. I showed photos of my plan, the drip lines, the native plants, the milkweed with a monarch tucked in. I spoke about the state rule without tossing citations, just the core. Florida-friendly is a right. You can set standards, you can't ban it. A woman in the back with a straw hat and steady eyes nodded like she was hearing an old truth. I let the plants sit on the table and pulled the money into the circle. I talked about Bay Breeze, the past due invoices, the assignment. I talked about Atlantic Pool Works, kids without a pool, the owner who thanked me twice. I mentioned the filing any bank would see on a quick check. Then I dropped a line from a lifetime of collections. I didn't come here to humiliate. I came here to propose. The room got quiet enough to hear a pen click. Simple proposal. Pause my fines tonight. Move toward a Florida-friendly policy with clear standards. Open the books for an independent audit. And work out a plan with me to pay what you owe the people who keep this place standing. Do that, and I'll knock 20% off the balance. Release the filing when you finish paying, and nobody sees a judge. Or we can play at hearings, and the pool stays closed. That's a threat, Greg said, smiling from the corner of his mouth, the kind of smile that confuses bravado with courage. That's a collection. The threat is fining me for saving water, I said, never raising my voice. Let the man speak, floated from the back. Ronnie, arms crossed like he was holding up the rest of the room. Marnie tried to cut in. I pointed to the paper. The state has a say here, I said. Nia, quiet till then, stood and asked for the mic with the calm of someone who runs machines that can take and save lives. How much cash do we have? She asked, and the question buzzed around the hall like a mosquito that won't let anyone sleep. Carol took a breath and said words that sounded like flow and process, but not like dollars. I held up the clipboard with the signatures and announced the special meeting called for the end of the month. The room lifted, regular people realizing they could tug on their own reins. Micro cliffhanger. The attorney leaned in to whisper in Greg's ear, like he was pushing reality where it didn't want to go. The board stepped out to deliberate. It felt like an oral exam when you really need the bathroom. They came back with a list that didn't fix much, but at least stopped the bleeding. They'd suspend the fines till the special meeting, start a committee to hammer out a Florida-friendly policy, promise to open the books, talk about negotiating with creditors. I looked at Marnie, who was squeezing a stapler like it was holding back a small anger, and asked about the management company. The lawyer said that decision belonged to the membership. The crowd gave a short clap, not victory, but we can see the reins now. I left without a trophy, but the field was chalked. In the parking lot, Marnie walked up, heels tapping short on the concrete, and said, "You are difficult. I'm clarity with a deadline," I said. And for the first time I saw something on her face that looked like respect. Looked like it anyway. You won't believe what happened at the special meeting. I didn't either, even from the front row. The day of the special meeting arrived with heat that felt like it rose from the ground itself. The clubhouse smelled like disinfectant and hope. I sat in the front row in an old t-shirt that said, "Measure twice, cut once," notebook beside me, black pen ready. Proxies were piled on the table. A clear ballot box sat in the middle. And the mood had that weird mix of party and entrance exam. Nia, already at the head table, was sorting ballots, explaining procedures, tending every detail with the calm of someone who knows process is a boat on choppy water. Ronnie counted votes with barracks-level rigor. Mrs. Carter, the one with the ducks, sat nearby with a notepad and glasses on her nose. so focused her plastic flamingos must have missed her at home. We hit quorum. The old board's junior attorney tried a maneuver, said something about defects in notice and footnote fine print in the bylaws. Nia flipped to the right page with the same ease she probably uses to set up an infusion pump. The recall vote began. 10 minutes that felt like 10 years. The silence during the count was a big animal. People held their breath. Even the AC seemed to turn itself down. When Nia looked up and said recalled, I saw three things at once. Greg swallowing hard, Carol studying the floor, and Anselmo searching his pocket for a sentence that didn't exist. Then came the new board. Nia, Ronnie, Mrs. Carter herself, a guy from the end of the street who does IT named David, and Marissa, a mom who organizes every volunteer thing under the sun. The room stood for a full minute. I could hear, faint in my head, Elaine's laugh and the sound of her hands coming together. The agenda slid like a hot knife through butter. A Florida-friendly policy with clear standards, defined aesthetics, minimum bed coverage, uniform mulch, drip irrigation required, and a maintenance plan. We backed it by an overwhelming majority. I heard an amen from the back that came with the smell of cornbread. Rescind the fines in my case? They presented it, talked 5 minutes, and passed it. I breathed and pocketed the urge to hug people. Swap out the management company? Seabright won by a wide margin with one clause I'd asked for. Monthly publication of the books, plus a vendor policy. Pay within 30 days, no exceptions, or the board itself gets dinged. Adopt an annual outside audit? Approved too. Atlantic Coast Management went out the same door it had used for years. Loud in emails, quiet when it had to explain money. Time for the creditor deal. I stood and spoke without a salesman's rush, but with the precision of a man who's closed a lot of things in his life. If you do your part, title note forgives 20% of the principal, just shy of $5,000, $4,920, and we set up a simple plan. $5,000 this week, then about $1,650 every month for 6 months, and a final payoff to release the filing. When you finish, the filing disappears. No junk fees, no microscopic footnotes. Larry in the back lifted his cap. Nate gave a shy thumbs up, the kind of man who prefers a filter wrench to a microphone. Nia called the vote. Approved. The room clapped again. Not triumph, relief. The relief of a neighborhood choosing to pay the people who edge our beds and keep the water where our kids learn to float. The next week, the check hit Title Note's account. I paid Larry and Nate the same day, with the agreed discounts, and texted them photos of the receipts. Larry replied with a voice message I played twice. Truck noise, radio in the background, and a "Thank you, Mr. Sam" that felt like a paycheck landing on time. Nate sent a photo of the pool filling, kids waiting on the side, a dog trying to drink through the fence, and my chest felt as light as the Lexus seat after a good vacuum. The next month, and the month after, the deposits landed the way they should. Nothing like seeing numbers drop where they belong. The garden, the reason for all this, became a symbol. Come October, the mully grass went cotton candy pink at sunset. The Monarch Highway turned into a real route. The Sabal palmettos nodded like heads saying, "Looks good, go on." One afternoon, Greg walked by with a hose running in the glare of midday. I could have pointed, called the new manager, asked for a warning. Instead, I walked over with my drip kit and asked, "Want help installing?" IFAS has a guide. It's easier than it looks. He swallowed his pride like bitter medicine. "I'll take it," he said. No gel in his hair, no forced charm, just a tired man. I installed it. For free. Not for him. For the peace. In the community newsletter, Seabright started publishing the numbers line by line. Cash, in and out, payables, vendors. One figure jumped out. The paving reserve was as thin as a stray. We fixed it. The finance committee, yes, I agreed to serve, set a 2-signature rule for contracts, posted a calendar with deadlines and owners on a digital board everyone could see. Paying in 30 days became the rule. Fining just to fine did not. You could feel the place changing, from the meeting room floorboards to the sidewalk, and the one who'd called me creative. The lawyer found me in the parking lot one day, a drink carrier in hand, and said, "You hit where it hurts." "I just pulled the right thread," I said. He laughed, cordial this time. Did the old board show up like a shadow? A little. Greg sent a message that was short for his ego. "Looks good," I replied with a photo of a butterfly. He sent a single period and nothing else. Anselmo vanished. Carol reappeared at a meeting looking for a document Seabright had filed away. She didn't apologize. Didn't need to. Paper speaks for us. The letter canceling my fines arrived on an afternoon that smelled like rain. Simple envelope, no proud crest with a line I kept like a trophy. Case regarding Florida-friendly garden, rescinded. I set it on the hall table beside a photo of Elaine in a blue dress. Her hair catching a slice of wind I swear blew off our porch right then. The house went quiet in a good way. The lake's fountain sighed in the background like it was thinking, finally. That same weekend, Greg called. Without the varnish, his voice hurt. He asked for coffee. He sat on my porch and stared a while at the stone with Delaney carved in it. "I was too hard on you." First thing he said. "You were wrong. Hard is what we all get a little when we're holding paper," I answered unhurried. I'm sorry. I'm not a man who collects apologies like stamps. But that one deserved a page. I didn't clap his shoulder or say no big deal. I said it was fine, as long as from here on he respected other people's yards. He agreed, and I saw something on his face that looked like learning. He pulled out his phone and showed photos of his own backyard, now with 2 mully clumps and a jury-rigged drip line. I offered hose fittings and connectors and ran my hand along the coquina path. Part of me wanted to crow. The part of Elaine, the one that still whispers what's right, asked for quiet and generosity. I chose her voice. Allison called on a cool morning, asked about the garden, wanted photos of the butterflies to show her students. Mark, who at first wanted me to sell and move, laughed and said he'd pin my story to the office board. Sam's playbook for when bureaucracy decides to play. I laughed with him, then added serious, "Respect the folks who paid bills for you, son. And when you have to choose between shouting and filing, file." The neighborhood was breathing different air. The pool reopened with that chlorine smell that feels like vacation. Kids ran, flip-flops slapping, sky reflected in the blue. Larry came to edge my mulch and told me he'd bought a new machine with the money arriving on schedule. Nate talked about filter swaps, proud to say he didn't owe a single cent anymore. Seabright emailed a bulletin with the figures, the kind that should have always been there: in, out, balances, forecasts. The finance committee met with sweet bread on the table and spreadsheets not to hide but to organize. At the last meeting of the month, Nia closed with a line I kept. "Standards and beauty aren't enemies of water and good sense." Ronnie, dry as ever, added, "And folks who pay on time aren't afraid to open the book." The room laughed. So did I. On my porch, the afternoon breeze combed the mully like a kid who won't sit still. A hummingbird paused at the little plaque I had made that reads, in understated metal, "Florida-friendly yard. Saves water, welcomes wings." The Lexus rested in the drive. The solar path lights clicked on like they'd rehearsed. Mrs. Carter, for the first time, went 5 whole minutes without tossing bread, just watching the monarchs. I raised my glass of tea toward the lake, as if Elaine, across whatever it is I don't understand, was raising hers. If there's a moral, and there always is if you're paying attention, it's this: try to fix everything by shouting and you'll make enemies. Fix it with paper and deadlines and you make a path. The HOA fined me for saving water. I bought their debts to save time. They called it a play. I call it paying the bills. I didn't have to slam doors. I opened drawers. I showed the law. I gave a discount when I saw remorse. To teach that justice with anger is vengeance that sticks to the soul, and justice with rules is life moving on. The other day, a new couple stopped on the sidewalk, looked at my garden and asked, a little shy, "Is it true they fine you for shade here?" "Used to. These days the shade comes from the moly when it blushes pink in October," I said, laughing. "If they ever fine you for saving water, come talk to me. We don't shout. We write." I'll bring the coffee, you bring the signatures. And if you've made it this far with a piece of paper in your pocket and a knot in your throat, hold on to the thing that got me through this summer. Standards and respect don't smell like fines. They smell like grass cut at the right time, chlorine in the right dose, a butterfly landing where it pleases. And if someone tries to punish you for that, pull the right thread. The rest comes along. You won't believe the peace it brings. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about the story in the comments. See you in the next one.